Uh, Welcome to our interviews, Mr. Uzair. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum. Barakallah feek. I'm fine. What about you?
Thank you so much. And by the way, of course, Mr. Uzair can speak many languages, including Arabic, but maybe he needs maybe to practice Arabic more.
Yeah, definitely.
So
One day,
he
who knows, I'll
prefers,
be able to completely hold interviews in Arabic, inshallah.
inshallah. So we'll go through this in English.
Yep.
Um, Thanks, of course, for joining us. Let's start asking about the situation in Afghanistan in general. For me, as you know, external observer, I am seeing the situation. I was reading your report. Actually, you talked a lot about the internal and external dynamics. But what was interesting, actually, that the new government, I mean Taliban, has a lot of tensions or problems with the neighbors, including Pakistan. And as much as we know that usually Taliban is supported intensively by Pakistan. So how we can, I mean, how you can explain the dynamics of those tensions and why? I mean, with Iran, with of course the United States, about also this is affecting the international recognition, but also regarding Pakistan, what is the issue?
So regarding, I'll start with Pakistan first. The issue with Pakistan is that, unfortunately, in the media, often people consider Taliban as just being followers of what the Pakistani government says.
Yes.
That basically the Taliban are merely a creation of the Pakistani state, and when the Pakistanis say something, then the Taliban must do it. Obviously, it is true that historically the Pakistani government has tremendously helped the Taliban, but the Taliban were formed in a sort independently. If you read, I really advise all the listeners to read the autobiography of Abdul Salam Zaif, who was one of the founders of the Taliban movement and was the ambassador of the first Islamic Emirate
Yes.
In Pakistan. And then he went to Guantanamo and he wrote an autobiography and he explained how the Taliban movement rose. It was independent from the Pakistani government. But then when the Pakistani government started seeing the Taliban gaining more and more territories, they started helping them. So obviously, no one is denying that the Pakistani government has helped the Taliban. However, the Taliban are an independent movement, and often it creates fiction because they don't want to listen to their Pakistani neighbors. And this is where we see big tensions between the two countries. So recently, since the Taliban gained, the Taliban regained control over the Afghan territory, the tensions with Pakistan, the relationship with Pakistan has been how could I say the relationship is becoming worse and worse. The main reason is the following: is that in the Doha Accords, one of the main
You mean the Doha agreement?
the Doha agreements.
Yes,
So
to clarify, this is just this is the agreement that based on it that the United States withdrew from Afghanistan. It was
exactly.
between U.S. and Taliban.
Basically, the most important, I would say, part of this agreement was that the Taliban would have to promise that they would not host any foreign armed groups on their territory.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that the Pakistani side accuses the Afghan government, the Islamic Emirate, of hosting Pakistani Taliban. So basically, for the listeners, there is a distinction. We have Afghan Taliban and then we have Pakistani Taliban. So
Yes.
these two groups have the name Taliban, but they have different goals and missions. Basically, the Pakistani Taliban are Pakistanis, okay, who helped the Taliban when the United States invaded in 2001. The Afghans went to Pakistani territories, they hid. And there they started befriending, Pakistanis who supported their causes, okay?
Are
So
they also, just clarifying, are they also from the Pashtuns, the same?
exactly, they're Pashtuns, because you have to understand that the main ethnic group of the Taliban is the Pashtun. The Pashtun are an ethnic group that are present on Afghan territory and Pakistani territory. So that is extremely interesting. So that's why when the Afghan Taliban, after the United States came, had to hide, they went to their Pakistani Pashtun brothers, okay? And especially the border between the two countries, between Afghanistan and Pakistan, is not really a border. How could I say? Is that it's really easy, to cross the border.
Overlapping very well.
It's extremely easy. So that's why when they started hiding in Pakistan, they befriended Pakistani Pashtun, okay? These Pakistani Pashtun helped the Afghan Taliban fight against NATO forces. But at some point, these Pakistani who helped the Afghan Taliban started focusing on the Pakistani government. They said that, okay, obviously we're helping you fight against NATO, but we also have to revolt against the Pakistani government, which is an apostate government. Okay, it doesn't rule by the Sharia, etc. So these Pakistanis started focusing on the evil Pakistani government, and they started attacking quite on a regular basis the Pakistani side, the Pakistani government. And since then, since the Islamic Emirate, the Afghan Taliban regained power 2 years ago, these Pakistani Taliban now, they allegedly regroup on Afghan soil and plan their attacks on Pakistan from Afghan soil. So that's why we have almost daily attacks on the Pakistani territory from these Pakistani Taliban that are hiding in Afghanistan. Am I clear or not? Is it understandable?
Yes, it is clear. But really here we can wonder also, I mean, the Pakistani Taliban, are they receiving really support, or just they have really, how much support they receive from the Afghanistan Taliban? I mean, what about the relationship between the two movements, as they are, as you said, they are the same name, they maybe somehow the same ideology, the same ethnic group. So are they, I mean, are Taliban Afghanistan supporting Taliban Pakistan in their attacks, or they oppose these attacks? What's the situation?
So still the situation is not clear, but at least when the Pakistani government, accuses the Afghan Taliban, they're saying that just the mere fact of letting the Pakistani Taliban on Afghan soil is helping them. Then when it comes to weapons, etc., we have conflicting reports, but the main source of tension is Pakistani Taliban being able to regroup allegedly on Afghan soil. And the thing is that many people realize only now, even though it had to be foreseen when in the Doha agreements, when the Taliban promised that they would not host foreign armed groups on their territory. Obviously now we realize that it's not something that was even doable. Because why? How? Imagine you're the Afghan Taliban. you have received help for so many years from the Pakistani Taliban that have helped you fight NATO forces for I don't know how many years. Obviously, now you come into power, okay? Are you really going to tell these Pakistani Taliban, goodbye, we don't want you anymore? Obviously, it's definitely like Al-Qaeda that we're going to, I know we're going to speak about it afterwards.
Exactly.
Is it really realistic that after receiving this much help, you're just going to tell them no, goodbye? So that's why the relationship between the Pakistani government and the Afghan Islamic Emirate is full of tension. Every day it seems to be getting worse and worse. So that is the main reason why those two sides are really not friendly anymore.
Let me ask you, you mentioned, I mean, this also, as you said, brings us to talk about the relation with Al-Qaeda, because
Yep.
maybe the same situation, they do have historically good relationship with the Al-Mujahideen Al-Arab, who
Yep.
are the root, let's say, groups of Al-Qaeda. And recently, there was this announcement from the United States that they killed Ayman al-Zawahiri in Kabul, in the
Yep.
capital. So this affected maybe the international recognition that Taliban was seeking, affected that maybe significantly. But here the question, there are, as maybe you mentioned, conflict reports. What is the relation now between Taliban and Al-Qaeda?
So basically, at least everyone can pretty much agree, and I think even the United States agrees that Al-Qaeda, at least in Afghanistan or in the region, um, Al-Qaeda has forces influence has really diminished, really diminished. Yet the Taliban have not denounced Al-Qaeda, okay? And the fact that Ayman al-Zawahiri was on Afghan soil is a testament of the Taliban still respecting, to some extent, Al-Qaeda. But then there is an interesting theory that I really find interesting, is that not all the Taliban leaders were actually knew that Ayman al-Zawahiri was in Kabul. And because the compound, the grounds on which Sirajuddin Zawahiri was killed was basically, it was, I think, an area of Kabul that Sirajuddin Haqqani owns. I think that it was the house. So some people say that Sirajuddin Haqqani, okay, he was the one personally hosting Ayman al-Zawahiri, but not, as a representative of the Taliban in general. And that is an extremely interesting point. Why?
You can highlight
that,
just on
yeah,
Sirajuddin Haqqani. He is the leader of Haqqani group, which is
exactly.
historically has relationship with the Mujahideen Arab.
But so that's what I was going to say, that the mention of Sirajuddin Haqqani and the fact that maybe he was the one personally taking care of Zawahiri, this can lead us to speak about the internal divisions within the Taliban. Because Sirajuddin Haqqani, he has so much power in a sense that he had the power and the authority to, on his own, take care of Ayman al-Zawahiri without necessarily consulting the rest of the Taliban. And that I find it's an extremely interesting theory, because it helps us understand the internal divisions between the different Taliban factions. Maybe if you want, we can speak about that.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, this is an important, because maybe everyone is asking himself, is Taliban, as you said, maybe is united movement? They are moving together. They are suffering from decision-making operation. They have wings inside. I mean, among or interacting between maybe different opinions. Yeah, I think this is important.
As you said, there are different factions within Taliban, okay?
Mhm.
And it's not a unified group as many people think it is. First, we have the most important faction is the Kandaharis,
Mhm.
those that have as a home base
Mhm.
Kandahar, which is a province in the south, and
Mhm.
it's the birthplace of the Taliban movement. Okay, Hebatullah Akhundzada, the current Amir al-Mu'minin, lives in Kandahar, and they,
Kandahar historically is a stronghold
yeah,
of Taliban.
e- even before that, the empire, the Durrani Empire, the modern state of Afghanistan, was based in Kandahar actually. Kabul only came after, but Kandahar was a stronghold. So
Mhm.
historically, it has loads of significance. But anyways, those in Kandahar have the power in their hands, and they justify the fact they should have power in their hands because they're the ones who have fought against NATO invaders and overall the foreign forces during the last 20 years. So now they say
Mhm.
that we have fought against them, we should have the power, and we should be able to to rule Afghanistan and impose our societal views. Okay, so that's why they're the most traditional among all Afghans. And since they have not traveled outside Afghanistan, they still have the same mindset as 20 years ago. Okay, so that's why they don't want women to study, they don't want
Mhm.
etc. Even though the rest of the Taliban don't have any real issues against women studying. But since Kandaharis are the ones who have fought,
Mhm.
so they shall have the final say. So that is the first faction. Then the second faction is the Haqqanis.
Mhm.
Their power, okay, can be seen, their influence can be seen by the fact that Sirajuddin Haqqani most probably hosted Ayman al-Zawahiri on his own without even notifying the rest of the Taliban movement.
Mhm.
Sirajuddin Haqqani is extremely popular. And historically, his faction, his dad, Jalaluddin Haqqani, was a famous war commander against the Soviets, okay? He joined the Taliban movement after it was created, but it had always a sort of independent mindset, okay? Independent mindset, and their power grew over the last 20 years for various reasons. Sirajuddin Haqqani is extremely popular. He's the interior minister, and it is said that he feels eventually that he should be the next Amir al-Mu'minin. Interestingly, Sirajuddin Haqqani, as I mentioned in my article, is that he's seen because the Haqqanis are known in Europe for being the ones who have popularized the use of suicide bombings in Afghanistan over the last 20 years. Because Sirajuddin Haqqani, his father Jalaluddin Haqqani, was extremely close to Arab fighters, okay? So the Haqqani family has adopted some techniques of warfare that were used by Arab fighters, most notably suicide bombing. So Sirajuddin Haqqani is really not popular among Western intelligentsia. Most notably, he has a bounty of several millions of dollars on his head. On his head. If you go to the FBI website, you know I think his head uh, is like $10 million, something huge. But still, he's the interim minister. And
But
interesting,
here is a question now. I mean, you mentioned about those two factions. I think it is a little bit clear. But
yeah,
here is a question also about the international recognition.
yeah,
It is an important point. Why we can imagine, or as much as we know, that Taliban is seeking the international recognition. But if they seeking that, why they are putting, for example, someone like Jalaluddin Haqqani, who is wanted from the United States, and he is accused of hosting Osama bin Laden as interior minister. This is appears strange.
it appears strange, but at the end of the day, if it isn't Sirajuddin Haqqani. What we can say is that most probably Western intelligentsia will never be content with most of Taliban officials. Like if it's not Sirajuddin Haqqani, then they're going to find things about other officials, because these officials, most officials, okay, that have fought, they have killed Westerners. So Western, okay, Western powers can always say that, nah, he did something, these guys did bad things in the past. We're not going to recognize the Islamic Emirate because of that. So also, but it is true that Sirajuddin Haqqani, okay, he's like the least favorite among Western circles. But then at the end of the day, Sirajuddin Haqqani is extremely important among. He has loads of power and loads of influence inside Afghanistan. So it is only natural that due to this power, that he has this role of interior minister, and that even if he wasn't the minister, he would have an important role in the Afghan government. So basically, they're stuck. The Western forces will at some point have to deal with people that consider terrorists, because most of the Taliban high officials, okay, have legitimized the killing of NATO forces because it was a state of war. So it will have to deal with people it doesn't like.
Yes. You mentioned something, I mean, and you also now and you report about the issue of, yeah, I mean, preventing women from education. You mentioned that it is maybe just motivated, or this policy, let's say, it is designed by Kandaharis.
Yep.
Well, the other components, let's say, or factions inside Taliban don't support this. But I think also in regarding the international recognition, it has, let's say, a big bad reputation or influence on the Taliban. So why also they don't, I mean, the other components try to affect the Kandaharis. And also, as much as we know, there are a lot of, let's say, independent experts or bureaucracy joined to Taliban government, because they are depending not just only on Taliban structure, because they enter the government. So they, I think, included many of the bureaucracy from the state, from the previous state. So are the other components try to shape or reshape this policy again regarding the women education?
So first of all, regarding women education, some people believe that Hibatullah Akhundzada's decision was mostly, okay, a reaction due to the fact the world was not giving enough attention to Afghanistan since there was the war in Ukraine. They also say that it was Hibatullah Akhundzada's decision was also a reaction to the fact that the US froze loads of Afghan assets, or that overall it wasn't, Afghanistan wasn't recognized. Okay, that Hibatullah Akhundzada was frustrated because of that.
So it's a kind of against or anti-Westernism.
Exactly. But then, so that is one theory. The other theory is that Hibatullah Akhundzada really believes that religiously it's not allowed. Because as a personal experience, okay, I was leaning towards the first theory I just mentioned. But then, as you know, I'm a Pashtun myself. So I often go to Pakistan, and by speaking to some elders, I do realize that some people really believe that schools, okay, they're a place of fitna. That by going to school, there's going to be ikhtilat, there's going to be free mixing between boys and girls, and that's going to lead to zina, to fornication, etc., etc. So now I believe that it is.
There is this possibility to have schools for just women, or for just for
Oh,
girls.
definitely,
There is no-
definitely. But they will say that we don't have the resources yet. We don't have enough female teachers. We still have, to completely separate the buildings so that there's complete separation, etc., etc. I'm just giving you the two theories. Maybe it's a mix of both. Maybe Habatullah Khunzada, he was hesitant. He wanted to do it. He was not sure, but when he saw that the Western world was not recognizing Afghanistan, he was like, okay, you know what? I was hesitant, but now let me do it. It's a final straw. I'm just going to do it. Maybe it's a mix of both. But at least what I can tell you is that most Taliban officials I've spoken to and most Taliban sympathizers I've spoken to, all of them are against that decision. They're really frustrated. They say that it's completely bad. It's a bad PR stunt. It is. With this decision, Amir al-Mu'mineen is seeking problems. He's only seeking problems. And they have tried internally, they have tried to change Amir al-Mu'mineen's mind. However, and that is something I wrote on them for the NGO I work for, even though they're not happy, even though they're not happy, they say that showing signs of displeasure in a public way might create more problems. Because if the Western world notices that there are deep internal tensions within the Taliban, they're going to take advantage of it, and that might lead to the end of the Taliban government. So they say that, okay, we're not happy with this decision, but still it's less worse than having internal war. So that is currently the mindset. Because
so
when
there
it comes
are a lot of balances, let's say, inside Taliban.
Definitely there's balances, and we have seen, most notably, Sirajuddin Haqqani being extremely critical of these decisions, which is another interesting point, because I was speaking to an official from a Western country, and he told me that on matters of how society should be organized, the Haqqanis are frankly quite open-minded. And that echoes something I have written in the article I wrote for you, that already since the 80s, Jalaluddin Haqqani was seen as someone open-minded on many societal issues. So, but definitely there's trying to be balance in that. But at the end of the day, the Taliban have a system of governance that is extremely similar to the way jurists, fuqaha, mentioned in their books, Siyasat al-Shari'ah, etc. The ruler, the Amir, he has the final say. Obviously, there's the concept of shura, of that the people close to him must advise him, but he has the final say. Amir al-Mu'mineen has the final say in that. We cannot do anything about it, but at least we can try to advise.
You mentioned, or you talked about, these complicated issues related to hosting those foreign groups. We are talking maybe about a lot of groups. What are the other groups? Like now we do have Al-Qaeda, we do have ISIS, we do have also Taliban Pakistan. What else?
Uyghur independence movements. You also have the Islamic groups for the liberation of Uzbekistan. You have many different groups, but
and all of them are a little. How much they are active, and how Taliban is dealing with them regarding. Because as you said, it is also, for example, regarding Uzbekistan, they do have relation with Uzbekistan, so it's kind of balance. They have to.
It's an extremely difficult balance, because it's similar to what happened with the Osama bin Laden, when basically the most logical choice would have been to tell to Osama bin Laden, you have to get out. Here, the Taliban, the most logical choice would be to follow what was written in the Doha Accords. However, it would completely destroy its reputation as the only true Islamic government in the world. Oh, so the only true Islamic government in the world is trying to kick out Islamic movements on its own territory. So on one hand, definitely it wants to be recognized, okay, by other countries, but on the other hand, it still has to hold, it still has to, it doesn't want its reputation as the only true Islamic government to be tarnished.
Especially they are in fight or in struggle against ISIS, and ISIS can use this as for propaganda, or I mean against Taliban, that you are murtadun, you are supporting or dealing with
exactly, because that is extremely, how could I say, because I follow ISIS news in Khorasan, okay, and it seems like every time the Taliban must speak to China, for example, I'm sure they're getting ready. They're like, okay, tomorrow we're going to get labeled as kuffar again because we have spoken to China. So they're really afraid. The Taliban are definitely afraid to seem, how could I say, too open-minded liberal in terms of international affairs, having relations with foreign actors such as China, Uzbekistan, because they know that at some point, if they become too friendly with these foreign actors, some groups present on their territories might become radicalized and join ISIS.
Yes, this is a big challenge, actually. Actually, you highlighted also in your report about maybe, let's say, maybe the two positive issues after the Taliban control, which is the relative improvement in the security situation, and also the decrease or reduced the reduce of corruption, and maybe the economic situation a little bit is stable. How is the situation? I mean, the economic situation, given that also we do have a lot of sanctions, and we know that there are frozen money of the central bank of Afghanistan.
So quite ironically, okay, it is true that actually the economic situation is extremely bad in Afghanistan. However, the Taliban have done good things economically. So it sounds kind of weird, but let me explain it. The situation is mostly bad in Afghanistan because of foreign sanctions. But however, on things related to their own economy, the Taliban have been they've done a good job, because obviously they spent, I would say, the last 20 years, okay, as an insurgent group. And that teaches you techniques on how to manage well your money, okay? So the Taliban have always been good with taxations. So when they came to power, obviously they took this knowledge and applied it at a state level. Also, the Taliban, since it is mostly a religious movement, they're going to be extremely, extremely wary of corruption, which was one of the worst aspects of the previous Afghan Republic. Okay.
Yes.
The Taliban wants to show it is an Islamic government. It follows an Islamic ethos. Obviously, it won't accept corruption. So the level of corruption has decreased so much that we could say that the Taliban can finance many of their own needs only through this system of taxation. Okay, so that is a good positive point. The other positive point you mentioned is the issue of security. It's easy why the security situation is much better, because over the last 20 years, okay, the fighting between Western forces and Taliban controlled areas was extreme. Okay, so now that you have only one power that controls most of the territory, obviously it's going to be much easier to travel. I spoke to some friends in Afghanistan, and it is the first time that they can travel region to region quite easily. Even if you have tourists, you have YouTubers that just go from one area to another, easy. Well, a few years ago, it would have been a completely different story.
Also, you mentioned about the relationship with Iran. We know that before, I mean, in the previous Taliban control, there was a big tension between Taliban and Iran. And
Yeah.
now, but I mean, during the American occupation, there were or there was good relationship or improved relationship between Taliban and Iran, because they do have common interests in resisting the Americans. But now there is now again this tension. What about the reasons? Are the sectarian issues or the border or what, or a mixture of all of that? What is the situation?
So when it comes to Iran, okay, maybe it seemed, because the fact there was the Americans for almost 20 years, okay, it kind of hid under the carpet all the tensions between the Taliban and Iran. Because for the sake of not having the Americans in the region, we're going to tolerate each other and we're going to help each other, okay? But with the departure of the Americans, now the true, okay, feelings between both parties appears again, okay? So I would say the source of tensions are based on 2-3 issues, but I would say the two main issues is a problem of refugees, because the number of Afghan refugees in Iran is huge. I don't have the exact number in my head, but after Pakistan, Iran holds such a number of refugees, and the thing is that the refugees, they don't have a proper, okay, identity in a sense. They have their own society within Iranian society, okay? So that's one of the issues. The second issue is related to the Helmand River, okay? Basically, there was a treaty on how to dispatch water coming from, so it's a problem of international law, okay, which has only become
and water.
Exactly, water and water. It has become increasingly worse because with the there's less and less water, so both parties, both countries need this water for their agriculture, etc., etc. So these are the two main issues. But overall, the Taliban and Iran never liked each other. I think it was in '98 when Iranian diplomats were killed, there was almost a war between the two countries. But just for the sake of getting rid of the Americans, there was a facade of maybe good relationship. But now it's just come back to how they really feel, So yeah.
It was interesting, of course, dialogue about the situation in Afghanistan. I think we do have a lot of issues and it is really complicated. Thank you so much, Mr. Uzair, for your insights, actually.